Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Kernel Network podcast. I'm here today with Alexandra and Avery, and I'm Erin, and we are research assistants at the Kernel Network. We're here to talk today about our experience transcribing for one of our recent studies, and that study is looking at the experience of autonomy for people living with dementia. Well, we were looking at the concept of autonomy. It's very abstract and philosophical, and a lot of people think differently about it. And it's especially complex when you apply it to people living with dementia. Cognitive decline really impacts how someone living with dementia can make decisions and execute actions. And so we wanted to see, what does autonomy mean for someone living with dementia, and for people who support them, how can autonomy best be supported?
Yeah, so for this specific study, we decided to do an IPA, so interpretive phenomenological analysis. And it's really just broken up into 4 parts. You first really put yourself in the shoes of the participant. You listen to the audio just by itself, or you're present during the interview itself. And then upon the second or third listening, you extract almost statements or notes called exploratory notes, trying to kind of piece together what's the idea that's here. Then what you do is you form experiential statements. So these are like direct quotes from the participant that's getting to the heart of what you're trying to investigate. And in our case, this was the lived experience of personal autonomy. And then finally from that, you then create themes based on case-by-case, like across the participants. So these are called personal experiential themes. And the cool thing about this, unlike just a traditional thematic analysis, is that rather than generating codes within a code book and sharing that across immediately, you have to look at each participant as an individual. And then that informs these greater themes, these superordinate themes, also called group experiential themes. And it kind of allows you to get to more so of the heart of an experience itself, rather than more so just correlating or similar things that were said across all participants. So it allows there to be more of a active voice per participant within the actual final results, which is really cool. Mm-hmm. And that was like a big part of why we're doing what we're doing with this project. When it came to actually finding the participants and the way that we went about recruitment, is that we did it through a retirement living community, in which staff who was well acquainted, very familiar with the people that were living there, right? The residents. They would then ask if they wanted to participate. We did a fair bit of literature dissemination. And from there, we actually recruited the persons living with dementia themselves and not caregivers. And this is a kind of a unique thing about our study, I would say. Just one of the big reasons is because a lot of literature that's out there, they just talk to the caregiver. And now granted, that's an amazing way to go about trying to get to a lived experience, especially with caregivers who are there all the time, whether they're formal or informal. Mm-hmm. But for this, what we really wanted to do was get to the heart of the lived experience of the persons themselves, like the person who is currently living with dementia. Mm-hmm. And though there's a little bit extra hurdles you have to go through with that, such as capacity assessments and possibly having to get proxy and assent if you can't get consent. It was, we thought, more than worth it to be able to answer our research question, which is, again, getting to the heart of this lived experience. So through that, we were able to get participants, and then we went along interviewing them at a place that they were comfortable at. Most of them, I believe, was in their rooms at the retirement living community. And they had the choice of either having a caregiver there to help them and assist them if they were having a little bit of difficulties, maybe understanding questions or any other needs that might be present. However, we also allowed participants to take the interview by themselves. And that was just to ensure that the residents felt comfortable to kind of speak their truth or speak to the reality of the life that they're living. Mm-hmm. Especially when it comes to things that might hinder autonomy, and not just those that promote and help support and sustain it.
Mm-hmm. My experience with this is I did a couple of capacity to capacity assessments for some of the participants to consent to the research. That was before our PI came in, so our principal investigator came in to interview the older adults, and then we had conversations about their ability to consent. We went through the information letter together and had conversations about that, and also made sure that they knew how to withdraw from the study at any point. Yeah, that was part one of that. And then or at least I did, as I helped transcribe the studies once they came off the recording from the principal investigator who did those interviews. So yeah, I went through, I think, 3 interviews, 3 out of the 8 fully, and then I heard the experiences from different participants and was able to help transcribe those.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there are like specific challenges that come with interviewing people with dementia, but like with the transcriptions themselves, there's challenges with just transcribing. Like you have overlapping voices, you're trying to establish context in the interviews. So like if a door closes or someone walks in or there's a new speaker, trying to understand what's happening in the interview itself. But then, yeah, as I mentioned, there's another layer when interviewing people living with dementia, because sometimes they might say something that seems unrelated at first to the research question, or they can go off on different tangents or talk about things that you're not necessarily expecting. So you don't have the same context for like if there's a phrase that's hard to hear, you don't necessarily have the same context to figure out what it is they're trying to say, which can make it more difficult. But it's kind of interesting, like when you're doing the analysis, you'll find patterns in the way that people are speaking or in the stories that they repeat, and it can give clues as to what their line of thinking is throughout the questioning. So it's quite interesting. There is like another layer of interpretation that the researchers have to do in this case. But yeah, paying really close attention to tone and repetition or emphasis is really important and can give clues to what the person's meaning is.
I just want to add on to that. Yeah, that's really hit every point. There's also this other aspect of double hermeneutics, in which you have to remember the transcriber isn't just transcribing verbatim and then just pulling textual information. There's another layer where you're trying to, again, put yourself in the shoes of the participant and saying, as the researcher, what is this participant trying to speak about their experience of this phenomena of personal autonomy? And I think it just gets you a little bit more like richer detail or data that's there, because you really have to almost embody the participant and not try to kind of change or transform anything they say, but take it as is and trying to get to the deeper meaning of why did they say what they said. Well, again, trying to think, is this true to what they're trying to say or what they're trying to mean? And especially with persons living with dementia, I think it just adds a whole different layer to it. That makes me a lot more appreciative of the whole work, as a whole. So.
Yeah, and one other thing I'd like to add too is I think it's something that they're struggling to understand themselves. It's a condition that I think it's hard to put into a singular box in terms of like what it is. So they're trying to understand what dementia even looks like for them while still trying to make decisions and have that autonomy. So I think that's an additional challenge to the research, but it also makes it more rich, and I think it can really support dementia care a little bit more broadly as well in that case.
Yeah, definitely.
There was like just mechanical challenges in a way. So again, these are older adults. Sometimes it's difficult to speak up or to really be clear and enunciate your words. One of the things would be, especially if you're talking about something really sensitive, you might go a little bit more quiet, or you might withdraw a little bit from the microphone, and it makes it a little bit more difficult to hear, especially from audio-only transcriptions. So in those cases, we're really thankful towards the PI, the principal investigator, who was doing the interviews, who was also taking care of these really detailed field notes. So whenever there might have been some phrase that was all together, Maybe it was a word that's difficult to hear. In the interview itself, the interviewer, their PI, would kind of restate what the participant said, just to make sure that it's like clear for the record what they were saying exactly verbatim. In addition to notes for possibly some of those words that weren't able to be picked up throughout a long explanation, where you couldn't bring it up right away. And that allowed us to have like a little bit extra detail to make sense of, again, just the more difficult to hear phrases, sentences, ideas that were found throughout.
Yeah, definitely. She was really good at clarifying.
Yes.
There was one time I misheard this word, and she actually like repeated it back. She's like, "Did you mean this?" And they were like, "No, didn't mean that." And I was like, "Okay, great. I was wondering the same thing."
Yeah. Sometimes they're the exact opposite, right?
Yeah,
Like you might miss a not or some type of negative of a word, and it completely changes what they're trying to convey, right? So being able to catch those small things, I felt like made a big difference.
Yeah, definitely. And sometimes like overlapping voices as well. Like there was a phone call on mine.
Yeah.
And so you have a recording of a phone call of someone on speakerphone. Just very difficult to hear sometimes. So that's definitely a challenge.
Yeah, in mine, I think somebody came in the middle of it. It was like a doctor's appointment or something. So the door opened and then the recording was stopped for a portion of time, and then coming back to it, it took me a second to get back into like the context of like what happened, and then I was like, okay, great. So, and then the PI or the principal investigator also filled in a little bit of information like, okay, we're sitting back down, and it was really helpful for me.
So I would say, like, in comparison to other transcription projects that we did, so I'm just thinking back to specifically with the Kernel Network, the area one with the physicians and their perceptions on medical euthanasia while being palliative care physicians, right? Those who participate and those that don't. The thing with that was, they're all doctors in a very controlled setting, and they what they wanted to say, they made sure they got in. Where that wasn't always the case, especially with our participants. And because of that, I guess it really forces you to engage even further with the interview data that otherwise would have not had to before, because it was almost spelled out for you of what was exactly trying to be conveyed. So I think as a researcher, it's definitely made me grow not just deeper appreciation, but more critical listening skills, I guess, across the board. Through transcribing and listening to these interviews over and over again to really make sure that we're capturing the participants' experiences.
Yeah, I think it's like I really appreciate that we allowed interviews in spaces where participants are most comfortable. So that was like within the residences, but I think also like allowing interviews in the home or in the community, like it does make it a bit more difficult because you might have interruptions or the audio might not be the best. But I think it makes like involvement in research more accessible, and especially for populations where you might not be reaching them in a clinical setting. Like I think that's really important that we did that, and I was glad to get experience like working with interviews in those conditions.
And I think for me, it helps me better understand lived experiences from people. So these are people who are like very real people who are affected by very real conditions that are made by people who don't necessarily experience or have the condition. So for example, like actually having conversations and being able to discuss something that policy could even affect. Like the decisions that they make or how they even understand like something that in a sense might be underlying, but they don't necessarily have the wording to deal with it, especially like autonomy. It seems to be something a little bit abstract in terms of like what actually is autonomy. I think I've had a couple conversations in doing the capacity assessments and explaining what autonomy actually is. So decision making and how you make decisions is the way we kind of I think introduced it or framed it, especially in every at the beginning of every interview. And I think it was really interesting to, I think for like knowledge translation, to like figure out how to explain to them like what we're actually looking for, and then also like I said, like connecting that back to like bigger policies and stuff, and actually having this affect different areas of like physicians, academic researchers. Like it actually comes back, and it can really enhance people's understanding of autonomy, and I think also dementia as well. So
Yeah, that's a good point.
So I think that might just be a little bit on how it helps the research as a whole. As my own personal research, I think it helps me understand how people, how to preserve the meaning that people are saying. Especially as I go through my own research and continue to work with older adults, I think it really gives me more understanding, and not that I didn't have it before, but a lot more compassion and empathy, I think, as well, for what they're going through and what they're experiencing.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Well, that was our last question. So we hope you learned a little bit about our study and transcribing. We're happy to share our experiences with you. And tune in to the next time we talk about the research that we're doing here at the Kernel Network. Thank you for watching.
Thank you.